Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the ABU group and our lunchtime learning sessions. We've had a break over the summer and we have actually come back on a very sad day. It is the 9th of September and Queen Elizabeth II died yesterday. But today we are going to pay a tribute to her in a way, because our subject today is about inspiring leadership and particularly the role of kindness in inspiring leadership. And today we have the lovely Bridget Sarikas and Kathy Scott, who've seen plenty of uninspiring leadership in their times. Kathy and Bridget are joining us from the States, so it's very early in the morning for them. And they are partners and co-founders of L3 Fusion LLC, which is a niche firm focused on transformational leadership that helps individuals and organizations maneuver through the chaos and complexity of today's organizations. And actually that's just feels so appropriate, because that is what our Queen, I think, did for 70 years and in an amazing sort of way, and as a woman. So I feel that we're kind of we're here to pay tribute to some of that has probably gone into all of our psyches, watching her through the years. So Kathy and Bridget, would you like to tell us how you got onto this journey and where you've come from and why you are both talking about this together today?
Certainly, and we are delighted to be here, and our condolences on your beautiful Queen.
Thank you.
She definitely displayed the type of leadership that we are talking about today, and so it's really a privilege to follow in her footsteps with that. I have been a nurse and a leader for a very long time. Started out as a critical care and trauma nurse, and had the privilege of taking care of very, very ill people, traumatized people, and then moved into executive roles for a long time, and met Bridget when we were consulting together on a very large and long assignment. And we were there to transform a health system. And there was so much bad going on. And so each day we would just chat with each other on our way back to the hotel, and we decided we need to write a book because there's such a better way to do this. So indeed, and she can tell these stories better than me, but we did write the book, and we shared a lot of our personal stories, and the book is called Stupid Gone Viral, so you can imagine.
Wonderful book, yes.
And thank you to our publisher. And so anyways, that really launched a whole line of executive and leadership coaching for women in particular, because it is a bit different for us. So we're delighted to be here, and I'm going to turn it over to Bridget.
Well, thank you, Kathy. So I have been incredibly lucky in my career, really, to have a wide range of positions and certainly various types of organizations. I've worked in professional services, I've worked in manufacturing, higher education, and healthcare. So Kathy and I have quite a bit in common, especially on that healthcare arena, but they're all quite different. But each one really presented me with a new and interesting opportunity that enhanced my skills as a leader, and really, I think sparked my interest in trying to come up with a business that could really help women on their journey, and individuals across the globe really on their journey to leadership in a much healthier way. So Kathy and I, when we met on this consulting assignment, we really talked a lot about that. How could we help the lives of individuals, and how could we help them not make the mistakes that we made, or, encounter, the crazy leadership that we might have encountered, and how we dealt with that. Sometimes it was through laughter. but definitely through kindness, which we'll be talking about today.
Absolutely. Yes. So how did kindness as a theme? I mean, it's not one that's talked about much in leadership books and leadership circles. It's I don't know whether it's almost seen as a sort of one of those female traits that make you seem weak. Have you encountered that sort of view of kindness?
Oh, yes. In fact, just the term, as you were saying, gets people's attention. Kindness, you know, we're in leadership. It is a really important aspect of leadership that we talk a lot about. We talk about grit and grace. And grit is really having that determination and that tenacity to overcome the obstacles that you encounter as a leader, as an entrepreneur. And there's so many of those. So grit is moving forward, getting through that to get results. But there's a flip side of that leadership coin, which is grace. And grace is all about getting the talent to the table. So people want to work with someone who respects and values them and demonstrates that in ways that motivate them. So kindness is really an important aspect of leadership, and it's so needed in today's world.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you know, kindness can be very restorative. You know, it touches that human spirit, and we all have that. You know, we might, you know, try to squash it at times, but we all have it. And, you know, it's really acting, as Kathy mentioned, with generosity and suspended judgment. I think as women, we often think that kindness does mean weakness because we're trying to get to the table and we think that we have to be really tough. And we can be tough-minded, but we can also lead with kindness at the same time.
So how do you work with leaders, with teams, to get them to be kind? Is it hard? Is it difficult to bring this out in people?
Well, it certainly can stop people in their tracks. It's such a powerful tool. So, and we often say, you know, you might work or lead in a very dysfunctional environment, but you can set the tone in the room that you're in. And it doesn't take, it's not rocket science. It's really just a demonstration of courtesy to another person, to getting them a cup of coffee, to acknowledging something that they just said that's pretty important, to eye contact. Eye contact is a really powerful tool that is actually honoring the person that you're talking to. So there are so many different ways you can demonstrate kindness that are subtle or overt, that are easy, cost nothing, and are just powerful in changing the dynamics of a conversation.
That's so interesting. I mean, and Michaela says, I agree, kindness is restorative, whether you're on the giving or the receiving end, which is absolutely true. Yes, it's a very much a two-way thing, isn't it?
Yes, it very much is. And, you know, and we can all role model every day, right? I mean, we often tell our leaders when we are in these sessions to demonstrate it both on stage and off stage. You know, Kathy often uses that term when we talk to each other. And, you know, it means that you don't just role model that in a group or with your team.
Right.
You know, you make sure that when you leave the meeting or that group discussion, you don't have those one-on-one sessions and sidebars that really badmouth or degrade individuals, right? That were in that meeting. And I'm sure we've all seen that happen. So it's really teaching individuals to think differently.
And do you find that that people try to be kind in an inauthentic way if they haven't been naturally practicing or behaving with kindness? Do you find that people at first start to, you know, try and do it as if it's a presentational thing before they learn to be authentically kind?
I think that happens, and I think it's okay. I mean, you've got to start somewhere. So if that's not your natural inclination, and if it's difficult for you, think of it as a skill. Practice it. practice it with someone that you're comfortable with. Come up with ways that you can demonstrate kindness in your own way, but start. And I think that's the importance of role modeling. When someone else sees their leader or their coworker actually behaving a bit differently, it spreads. That is the exciting thing about it. It gets people's attention, and you begin to shift the dynamic of the team.
That's that's wonderful. And but I mean, do you find are you called into work with teams where there is not kindness present, where leaders and managers are acting in, you know, a kind of typically what we'd think of as an unkind way? And how do you then work with people to tell them they're being unkind? Is it hard to confront people with their own unkindness?
It's not hard for me, because I think it's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And it's disrespectful to people. And it's just not okay. So, I mean, we use different tools to help us with that, but one would be we create rules of engagement when we go to an organization. So we have a big conversation around it. Bridget and I share our observations. This is what we're observing. This is what we're seeing. And here's the outcome from that. This is going to destroy trust in your team. This is going to create an ugly competitive process that is not going to move the team forward. And so let's create some rules that we're all going to live by, write them down, talk about them, and then we all need to commit to calling out the rules if they're not being followed, and having conversations. So yeah, you have to be tough-minded to demonstrate kindness.
Yeah, we often say you really have to be prepared for the brutal truth. You know, get ready to hear the tough stuff, because that's the only way you're going to, you know, improve. And you have to be willing to accept what you're hearing, right? And do that with an open mind. But you also have to be kind to yourself first, right? We often say that because we aren't. Gosh, there's so many times in a day that we forget to be kind to ourselves. And if we can't be kind to ourselves, how do we extend that to others?
Yes, of course, that's so incredibly true. So when you go into an organization or a team and you find that there is somebody in a leadership position who is not acting acceptably, as you say, Kathy, how do you put this to them, and how do you without making them, you know, sort of I don't know, kind of reject the whole concept, without I suppose undermining their sense of self by telling them they are not being kind?
Well, that's a great question, and it's you have to do it with great thought. But people's behaviors come out of their values and their beliefs. And so a great way to approach that is, if you see, and I'll just share a common example is, and I know it's the same in the UK, but there's a lot of conversation about nurses eating their young or being unkind to each other. And you know, nurses work in teams. So you got to figure out, how are we going to deliver the care and service that our patients and clients need? So when you see that, just as if you see it in a boardroom, a good way to deal with it is to talk about the underlying beliefs or expectations that are feeding that behavior. So when you can start talking about those and not the person or their personality, you can start to get people's attention. And it's more like an aha moment, like, whoa, yeah, I want them to play ball with me, but I'm approaching this as if they're my enemy. Is there a better way? So part of it is just helping people understand the way they think and how that drives their behaviors, and doing that in a coaching session offline. This is not you know, in front of a group, but
Yeah.
working with people to help them find a better way. And it truly helps if you care about that person.
Right. And it's also important to teach them how to have real conversations, how to help them actively listen to what the other person is saying, and to ask questions that lead them to a positive place, not always to a negative place. And that is, as we said earlier, that's practicing a skill. And you've got to practice, talk to a friend who's very good at that and figure out how you can emulate some of those characteristics. It goes a long way. I mean, those conversations are really important to those that you lead.
That's,
Yeah,
yes,
I gotta say, questions are such powerful tools. So Bridget nailed it there. When you can ask someone, tell me why you said that to so and so. Tell me what your thinking was. Wow. I mean, let them unpack it. And
right.
it kind of stops people and helps them really think through, whoa, yeah, why did I do that? That's not too
Yes, I
cool.
can imagine you get some really extraordinary sort of thought processes and sort of revelations for people when you start unpicking their behavior in that sort of way. Mary Jane, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think when you ask those questions, sometimes what you find out is that someone is really having an extraordinarily bad day. Something horrible just happened in their life. They didn't mean to go down that path, but they did.
Right.
And when you can ask those questions, you really learn more about that person and you take a burden away from them, which they've been, they're kind of waiting for that to happen. And you do that for them.
Yes. Yes, no, that must be wonderful too. So Mary Jane says, if there is lack of kindness, I believe the only way it changes is if someone wants to change their behavior. The desire to change has to be there first. Is that what you find, or can you kind of go in there with people who have no a kind of prior desire to change and make it happen?
Well, I think we see both. I think people can change their ways when they're watching what's going on around them, because we all do this risk thing. We're all kind of looking at a situation and deciding, what are the risks to me if I do, and what are the risks to me if I don't? So the goal would be to create environments where it's more of a risk to not be kind than it is to be kind. And so you have to start shifting. It's not a quick, fast process, but at the same time, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you talk about the epidemic of rightness and kind of rightness about or needing to be right being the opposite to being able to be kind, and also about multiple truths and the impact on our effectiveness of that sort of how that sits, I suppose, in the workplace, in society at the moment. What exactly do you mean by that?
I love this topic. So we live in a world, not just a society, but in a world where we are polarizing. And so we go to one pole or the other, and my truth is the truth. And what we see over and over is you're trying to shove your truth down someone's throat, or stand up loud and yell your truth. And what we're missing, when we do that, is we're not connecting with the other person. I mean, you're not going to change someone's mind by yelling your truth. And with all the identity groups out there now, we're seeing more and more of that. And what people really want is for you to see them. And so this polarization is not getting us to where we need to go. And so just subtle ways of listening, asking questions, calling it out through rules of engagement, etc., are powerful tools to get people's attention, because it's almost like the kid who is demanding your attention by bad behaviors, which makes you respond differently. So it's important to really demonstrate back kindness, that, and I'm going to say tough-minded kindness. They can go together.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, we often call this, we see an empathy famine, right? Or what we would call a collective grief. And that an alternative really is needed. And this kindness before rightness and empathy are truly what is needed, especially right now with everything that's going on in the world and around us. And it's important, I think, to note that empathy is not the same as sympathy. These two often get very, very confused. Sympathy really is, I feel your pain, but empathy is trying to understand that individual and walk in their shoes. It's very different. You don't have to agree, but the actual nature of listening and hearing someone's views, trying to understand what they're dealing with, as we talked about earlier, can really help bring out that humanness in all of us.
Yes, that's so very true. I mean, have you got an example of when the two of you went into a team where there was a lot of unkind behavior and activity going on, and you made an intervention, and what happened afterwards?
Wow, where to start?
I'm sure you've got so many, it's hard to pick, but it would be lovely to hear something. Obviously, don't tell us who they are or where they are, but
well, we've had plenty of those experiences, and it looks, a boardroom came to mind immediately for me, where we had a very unprofessional CEO who would just tell the group what they should be thinking and doing, and they would all nod their heads and everyone would shut down. And then after the meeting, they would go out and talk about what a bad person he was. So, Bridget and I talked about, what are we going to do with this? So a couple of things. We would, rather than let him go on and on, would got a couple questions about that. So that takes some courage, some questions about that, because that hasn't been my experience here. Or I think there's more to that story. And then to encourage someone else to speak up. So-and-so, I know you had an experience with that the other day. Would you be comfortable sharing that with us? So it's really around conversations like that, and not letting someone shut down the conversation in the room, and using those tools in your tool chest to get other people to talk in a safe way. And sometimes that takes prep before the meeting. And it's not easy work. I mean, that's just one of so many examples, but I know Bridget had some.
No, but I think it's important when you go in anywhere into these conversations that we can help show individuals how to do that, right? Because no one's going to just jump right in and think that they have the ability to engage in that way, to ask those questions, because they're waiting for someone to show them that. And we're happy to do that. But boy, it's very interesting. Once they see us, take the lead, it just opens up, the whole world for them. And then they start coming behind and doing the exact same thing. So there's an energy built because they see that it is possible. And conversations like that, productive conversations, can be had, and you can lead with kindness. And when you do that, that has an energy behind it, and people very much get on board with that, and it energizes them. They leave the room, they go back, and we've often followed up, and they said, we now do that with our own personal teams because we found it was so effective. It may be difficult, but you got to be brave, right? Be bold, be brave, be fierce, be a little bit fierce.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. So you kind of go into team meetings or board meetings, and you sort of kind of taken a kind of underground control of those meetings, which sounds absolutely brilliant. But do you ever find that people, I mean, for instance, the CEO you kind of were mentioning, do they ever feel undermined by this? You must do it in such a subtle way that presumably they don't.
There are people who do not like it. There are people who want control, command and control.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I may not be able to change their behavior, but I can change mine. And so we approach it with, you do what you can do. And I don't know if you're a Margaret Wheatley fan, but I love her. And she does a lot of leadership work. And she talks about creating islands of sanity. And I love that term, because there's a lot of crazy in the world. There's a lot of mean in the world. And quite frankly, there's a lot of very unhealthy emotional and mental illnesses going on in our midst. It's just grown and grown through the pandemic. So we look at it as we have an opportunity to change the way we conduct ourselves in healthier ways and teach people who are interested to do that and role model that. There are people that have zero interest at all. And then if you're working with them, I can't stress this enough. When you start to change the way you interact with them, you will see a change, maybe not enough for you. And you may choose to go elsewhere. You have choices in life, but you have to work with you, and that's the best we all can do.
Yeah, and I think when you see this in groups, when they're doing this and they take this back to their teams, what happens is not only do they create the energy in their team, but they become a very high performing team that permeates the rest of the organization. And people start saying, what are they doing that I'm not doing? And so then they get on there and they actually ask, what are you doing? How can I, do the same thing? And so it does get around the organization to where ultimately it will get right back up to that CEO. And he'll realize just what a difference those kinds of behaviors are making. He or she may not like it, but at the end of the day, it's ultimately benefited them.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. There's a little sort of discussion in the comments here about, I mean, Michaela said, I wonder how far people's leadership styles are influenced by their upbringing, the whole nature nurture thing. And Mary Jane says that she thinks upbringing plays the biggest part. Do you have any thoughts about that and where people are coming from, what, has really influenced them at an early age about kindness and leadership styles?
Oh yeah, it has everything to do with how you behave and lead. And so you're working through a frame that was created by your past experiences and your whole belief system as you came up as a child and an adult. So that's why I said unpacking though your thinking and the beliefs that you have that lead to the way you behave is really an important part of this work, because it could be completely unconscious to you. I remember as a nurse, I was raised in Detroit with all brothers, and so that's definitely a different world than many had. And I was a critical care nurse. And I remember my first evaluation from my manager, who I had a lot of respect for. And she said, Kathy, people are having a hard time with your sense of humor. Wow. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, some people find it offensive. And I said, really? Because I had not one offensive, I wasn't trying to offend. I was trying to lighten the situation. Yeah. And it kind of hurt my feelings, but I'm tough. So anyway, I had to really think about that and think about, why do I use that kind of humor? And I was raised in a family that used that. So it was more like sarcasm or dry humor. And people are like, I didn't know you were really kidding. Like, of course I was kidding.
Yeah.
So I had to change my ways because it was negatively impacting relationships, which is not what I wanted to do. So just that, her telling me that and saying, think about where that comes from. It was really a point in my early career that got my attention and made me think about how to do things differently. So yes, our past has a huge influence on our present, but there are so many things that we can do to continue to better ourselves. And Bridget and I talk a lot about pursuing excellence versus perfection. And this is that excellence path. We can keep improving.
Right.
But I think that story that Kathy just told, it really emulates kindness right there. This individual that spoke to Kathy didn't do it in a negative way, did it with kindness, really wanted to help her understand what might be causing her to be held back in her career or with her colleagues. And what a wonderful way. Again, she was questioning, she was talking to her in such a positive manner. And those are those moments in our careers that really are life-changing. And thank goodness, that we have them, but it's all in how they're delivered, right?
Yeah, absolutely. How it's delivered to you and how you deliver it to others. It's yeah, that's so interesting, and thank you for sharing that, Kathy. That's really honest, and I guess that's the sort of work. So you must be doing really deep personal work with some of the leaders you work with, as opposed to team meetings and board meetings. You must actually be doing deep stuff with in a one-to-one situation with people.
We do one-to-one and we do group. It just depends on, what people are interested in. But even when we're not there to do deep work, like a coaching, we often end up getting into that coaching because there's a need and it's influencing the team in some way that is counterproductive. So yeah, that's an important part of what we do.
But I think we also, one of the things that we both love, especially, is working with women's groups. So within many of these organizations, they do have, separate women's groups that are dealing with their issues in the day, and they'll bring us in to work with them. And when you can have a group of women who are not, quite frankly, when you're in a mixed group, you do hold back quite often. So when you're in that group together, wow, it's pretty powerful. I mean, people are ready to talk. They have had concerns. And then they actually find out, wow, you feel that way? I didn't know. I thought I was the only one. So, there's strength in numbers. That conversation really helps lead them to a positive place. And they realize that they don't have to stay silent, that there are ways that they can use their voice. And my goodness, use your voice, because you have a lot to give, a lot to share. And by holding back, you're doing everyone a disservice, your team a disservice, the organization a disservice. So step up, use that voice, but use it in a positive way. And we help them really figure out how to do that.
That sounds, that's brilliant. I was going to ask, and I don't want to seem sort of that I'm kind of putting stereotypes on this, but you just kind of raised the subject of working with in women's groups, and I wonder if, and it may just be a question of sort of style, but do you find that there is more or less unkindness displayed by men or by women, or is it just a very different kind of unkindness that the different sexes will display?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that I've seen so many kind men, but I think they display it differently, which is fine. You can show me kindness 100 different ways. I'm good with that. But men are much more, I would say, direct. And I also have 3 sons, so I was raised with boys. I have boys, so I get guys. Very direct, very, and then they're over it. Women have a different emotional makeup, so it does look different, but I wouldn't want to say women are kind and men aren't as kind, because I've seen a lot of nasty girls, quite frankly, who are not displaying kindness in any way, shape, or form. So, and it's okay to have different styles. What the point of kindness is demonstrating respect for the individual that you are working with. It is that connection. It's like caring enough to hear what you have to say. It's important enough to me to make sure you understand my thinking on this so we can get on the same page. Those are acts of kindness, and sometimes it's as simple as a hand on a forearm to say, I got it, I got you. You know, it can be something simple.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think men and women in organizations, you know, they do have different styles, but I think that in the past, women have really held back their views, their opinions, or if something has bothered them, they're like, oh, I can't bring that up. But there are ways respectfully to do that. And I think we're seeing, you know, more often that men in organizations, they may not have been aware, but we're helping them be aware. And I think women can do a great job of that. And again, do it with respect. You don't have to do it in a full room of people. You can take them aside. There are ways, but again, use your voice. I mean, people don't know what they don't know.
No, that's such a good point. Yes, Helena says, I love that definition of kindness. Yeah, she says, I'm loving this, and I'll have to come back in. She obviously joined a bit late, and so she'll have to come back in from the beginning. We're actually getting close to the end now, so I want to go to what you say that you said that you would talk about, and about how kindness before rightness. I don't think we've really addressed the kind versus right issue that you've raised in what you're going to talk about, and how it can serve as a strong medicine for our mental health. There is I mean, I think interestingly, we've just in Britain, in the UK, seen a huge display for the last few weeks of a leadership campaign, which was all about who's right. And then we are then faced with the example of looking back at the Queen's life, where she never seemed to have to show herself as being right about anything. And that came over as massive kindness.
It's so true. And I think, again, there's this tendency these days to get your views out there. And I'm just going to say, if you're doing that, there has to be a receiver of that information. And I can't receive it if I don't think you care about me. And so this kindness before rightness, it doesn't mean I agree with you. It means I care enough to listen to what you have to say. And I may or may not influence you, but I want to walk away with, we had a connection. I understand what you're thinking, and I'll give it some thought. There's so many times when you can hear someone, it changes the relationship, just that you took the time to listen. So like you said, the Queen, I saw pictures of her on the news last night they said she has reigned when 14 of our US presidents have been in office. That just blows my mind. And they showed all these clips of her with our presidents, and every single one, she was smiling and they were laughing. And it was a beautiful, beautiful picture. And she's tough-minded, but she demonstrates kindness. And then when she does that, people are able to hear what she has to say.
Yeah, I think it creates what I would call healthy conversations. I mean, when you can do that and not be so concerned about the rightness at the very beginning of a conversation, and extend that first, that kindness first and foremost, your conversations become much healthier.
That's that must be so true. And it's very interesting too that we've also seen, you're right, we've seen clips of the Queen with all your presidents, but also our prime ministers. She's also been, you know, she's been with so many prime ministers of the UK over her reign. And they've all, the ones who have spoken on the news, on TV, whatever, have all said that they so much valued their weekly sessions with her. And I'm sure it was because, you know, she didn't have a point of view she didn't force her point of view on them. She talked about, don't know, perhaps, you know, the sort of history, the context in a broader way. And obviously they all they're so different, and they have all come out and said how much they enjoyed being with her, which must be to do with her ability to be kind. And that's what they felt from her.
Right. Yeah,
absolutely. When you think about this day and age with so much mental unhealth, how powerful that is. And there are many people who don't get to experience kindness in any way during their day. So think about those moments, and it literally stops them in their tracks. I mean, I've seen Bridget walk up to a person who was pretty ornery, and when we were working, and say, "Hey, you want to come and get a cup of coffee with me? Or can I get you a cup of coffee?" And I thought, wow, that was way to go, Bridget. But it's an act of kindness, and it stops them in their tracks, and it changes the conversation. It's just a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've all had bad days where one act, one comment, one action has made us go, oh, that's the nicest thing that's happened to me today. And it's always an act of kindness, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And they can be just small. I mean, you don't have to come up with something huge for your entire team right away tomorrow. You know, just start small, and you'll feel good, and they'll feel good.
Oh, that's a great thing to say. I was just going to say, to finish off, can you both give us a couple of tips of how we can just go about being more kind than I'm sure many of us are already, being as kind as we can be, but a couple of tips for sort of, you know, just taking that a step further.
Yeah, so I would say, remember what an act of kindness is. It's a connection, person to person. That is an act of kindness. And so it doesn't have to be mushy. It doesn't have to be over the top. It's taking the time to stop, look them in the eye, and hear what they have to say. I mean, that is one powerful tool. And it's also, I'll say what it's not, is accepting everything they're telling you. That's not part of the kindness demonstration. It's really being there and interested in enough in them as a person to ask questions, demonstrate that you think they're important in some way, because they are, and take a moment.
That's
yeah,
brilliant.
I would say also, you know, you can't be kind to others, again, as I said earlier, if you aren't kind to yourself. So start your day, your personal day, with doing something kind for you. And then your first interaction, try to make that be a pretty kind one. You know, I mean, how many of us wake up and are cranky in a day, and it you know, seems to permeate the rest of the day? Well, change that attitude. I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. And you'll be surprised. I mean, again, start small, you know, but it really can change your day, and ultimately will change all the day, all the individuals' days around you. And they'll appreciate that kindness. Gosh, it will move like wildfire through the group.
That's so true. And also, I mean, it's so good for oneself, isn't it? I mean, when you perform an act of kindness, actually you feel great as well. So, you know, it sets you up for the day, sets you up for, you know, the next hour or so, whatever it is, but you get a huge buzz from being kind as well. So from a selfish point of view, it also works well for other people's mental health and our own mental health.
Well, and I think the funny thing is I'm a talker. I love to talk. And so when I get into an elevator, I've got to talk to everybody in the elevator. And that's so annoying to so many people. However, if you do it with kindness, especially in the morning when everyone is either plugged in or they got their coffee and they've got this scowl on their face, and you're like, how are you today? You know, hope you have a great day. I mean, they look back and are like, oh, well, hope you have a good day too. So, you know, it can be just something small that really will, I guarantee you, it'll change that person's day when they get off that elevator.
That's so absolutely true, because I'm the person in that elevator, in that lift, who's looking down and not wanting to talk to anybody or make eye contact. and yeah, when somebody, you know, genuinely kind of makes some kind of communication that's genuine and kind, as you say, it just does actually lift you, even if you didn't want to be lifted.
Right, exactly.
At a point.
It does.
Right.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bridget Sarikas and Kathy Scott, really appreciate your time. It's been a wonderful conversation, and on this particular day. So thank you very much for being here, and please come back into the conversation. And there's some comments there. Oh, I'll just tell you that Michaela says, I think that Americans are generally so much better at that than Brits. So yeah, that's probably the difference between us.
I don't know about that. So. But thank you.
Yeah, no,
All
thank
right.
you both so much. It's been lovely having you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You've loved it. Thank you.